right, Arpin, we're going to start the show the way you suggested, just for the sake of good old times. What's up?
For the record, I did not suggest that. I just happened to
Yes, you did.
I popped on the video with the what's up, really old time what's up.
Oh my God, that's really from a blast from the past. All right, October 3rd, Friday. The Canadians wrapped up their last practice in Quebec City. They're going to be back in Montreal to play the Ottawa Senators on Saturday night, a rematch of sorts. I think let's start with that. Well, let's start with those Senators Canadians tilts. What happened on Tuesday, and what we can expect also for tomorrow. More of the same for Saturday night, you think?
I hope not. I think it depends on the thing is right now, the big distraction, and if it's not in this game, it'll be the next time they play the Senators, is Nick Cousins is going to have to fight, right? Like this is clear. Three different guys in the room afterwards made some allusion to the fact that we don't forget. I think Arbor Jack, I might have said the same thing yesterday. I mean, it's just like it's in the immediate aftermath, Gallagher was like, you take a number and you don't forget. So this is a simmering situation, and I just gotta hope that the Senators dress Cousins and frankly put him in the starting lineup and just get that over with, because they're gonna have to. That's gonna need to be taken care of, because that was a really dirty slash. I think Cousins should have been suspended for it. The sad reality is that had Demidov been hurt by that slash, or had he been injured, and depending on the severity of the injury, but if he broke his wrist, let's say, and was out for 2 months, then Cousins would have had a significant suspension. And so because he wasn't hurt, he gets slapped with a nothing fine. So that's one thing. If I were the Senators, even, I would be like, okay, let's get this over with. This is going to happen. And frankly, the Senators might be looking for a pound of flesh from Jaden Struble. They weren't too happy that he cross-checked Jan Yannick in the face, justifiably so.
Yeah.
Left him bloody and really looking messed up. So that might be another issue that needs to be settled on Saturday, which is unfortunate, because the prime issue that both these clubs need to settle, probably the Senators more than the Canadians, but they have questions that need to be settled before they set their roster for the season. The Senators sent a very B-level, if not C-level team to St. Louis and got totally smoked. So that's back-to-back games where they've been completely killed. So they're going to want to.
They need to get ready for the season.
They need to get ready. They need to play a game and be competitive. So So that, I think, is a good thing, that they got so badly beaten in St. Louis that they will be motivated to play their NHL guys and not have a guy like Hayden Hodgson in the lineup to do what he did with Alex Newhook, which also merited just a fine. But I was more okay with that one than the Cousins one. But so once all these like code related things get settled on Saturday, then hopefully the two sides like recognize the fact that they need to play hockey and they need to settle some questions. And for the Canadians, there's lots of them still. You look at the lines of practice today, and there's a lot of people still in the mix, right? You have Veleno taking Bolduc's spot. Zach Bolduc, if you missed it this morning, the Canadians announced he was not practicing with a lower body injury. Would imagine that would rule him out for the game on Saturday, but unclear to what extent that jeopardizes his ability to start the season or not. But
he already played 4 preseason games, so even if he was healthy, he could legitimately sit in for a guy who earns a last audition, let's say.
Exactly, and I think there are a lot of guys who have earned last audition. So it was interesting to see Joe Veleno take Bolduc's spot on the line with Kirby Dach and Brendan Gallagher, which in and of itself was an interesting development of practice on Thursday. And then you have the line of Anderson, Evans, and Laine, which is interesting. And at practice, at least, you had Blais, Beck, and Florian Xhekaj on a fifth line of sorts. To me, Marty has said from day one of camp that he would like to go with his NHL guys in that last game, right?
Mhm.
But you have so many, and credit to these guys, like they have not made it easy on the coaching staff or management to just be like, okay, here are our NHL guys. I think there's some that they don't know yet. I think it's fair to assume that Oliver Kapanen is going to start the season in Montreal. I think that's a fair assumption to make, and he's earned it. Has looked better and better as camp has gone on, and has looked more dynamic offensively than he was previously last year or even earlier in camp. So that's a good development. He's probably ahead. And then you have Veleno, Blais, Beck, and Florian Jacki, who all, to varying degrees, um, have earned that audition. Blais, I think, because he brings it out. Blais is kind of in the category of Jacki as guys who bring a certain physical element that they would like. Um, Beck and Veleno, guys who can play center, help out on draws, kill penalties. They also add elements that they would like. So there's nothing set, and that's, as Marty said numerous times, a good problem to have. They have options, but it's going to be interesting to see if they go with the lines that they went with on practice on Friday. That would suggest that Blais, Beck, and Florian Jacki wouldn't play on Saturday, and so
Mhm.
um, that would be telling. You would think, but
I,
I'm wondering if they're going to give everyone one last audition on Saturday.
yeah, well, Florian Jack, depending on the type of roster that the Sens put out for Saturday night, you could
Yeah.
leave yourself, the possibility of dressing Florian Jacki or not, or Samuel Blais.
Hmm.
But I have a feeling that right now Kapanen and Veleno have the inside track for those jobs 12 and 13, and it's coherent that if Bolduc is missing a rep and he's missing a practice, he's replaced by a guy who could have a chance of making the team. So, and you just leave those guys who actually are meant to be scratched or sent down. But you're right to say that Kapanen has looked better as the camp went on. Halfway into the camp, you remember we said that we thought that Owen Beck was slightly ahead,
Yeah.
but those games that Kapanen and even practices on Thursday, because Marty says those we make decisions not based on a goal or based on a game, but it's an everyday evaluation.
Hmm.
Well, during Thursday's practice, there was a 4-on-4 drill, like in the offensive zone, and Kapanen was on the defensive the team that was not in control of the puck, but the sort of pressure that he applied on Engstrom, body contacts twice, he made him fall. He made Engstrom fall and separated him from the puck, and that's the sort of detail that in the practice doesn't go unnoticed because very few guys use their body defensively in that drill or in the entire practice the way that Kapanen did.
Hmm.
So this is the sort of detail that I think catches the eye of Martin Saint Louis and the coach must like that, and see that this is the sort of little element, the extra thing that I'm looking for, especially from a guy like Kapanen who, he's gotten bigger and more mature physically, but he's not a tough guy by any means. But if he can add that component a little bit here and there at smart times, that's just one more thing in his toolkit. And so far, I've really liked what I've seen from him because he seems to be getting more comfortable, especially offensively, when you've got fast guys around him. And it served Demidov too.
Yeah.
That it's ultimately you could say, well, Kapanen is not the level of player that Demidov should be playing with. Demidov is too good for that. At some point, I'm sure that we could come to that conclusion. But if you just want to get things started, start the season with pairings that work with just guys that have figured out a way to get things underway during the season, during camp, are ready for the season. And for better or for worse, Demidov has looked better with Newhook and Kapanen than he has with Dach and Liney. So
And don't forget, last season, Lane Hutson started the season with David Savard.
Yeah.
And everyone knew that wasn't going to last, but everyone also knew that this made perfect sense for now. This was a good way to start the year for him. It didn't last very long, but that's where they put him. So that's a bit of a tell. I think we've mentioned it, and then I just think it's worth reiterating the extent to which it's important that Demidov be well surrounded and that he be given a chance to succeed right off the bat. We've talked about that already. And the thing about both Kapanen and Beck that give them an advantage, and even if Beck gets sent down, would give him an advantage in an eventual call up, is they both pair well with Newhook as right shot centermen who can skate and who can help with those right side faceoffs. And so um, that is an advantage that Veleno, for instance, doesn't give. You don't want to pair two lefty centermen on the same line. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in terms of helping to split the face-off duties. But if Kapanen and or Beck, but likely Kapanen to start, is able to win a fair percentage of those right-hand draws, we've already talked about how so far Newhook looks pretty well improved in the face-off circle. We'll see if that lasts into the regular season or not. That gives that line a chance to get on the ice far more frequently, and especially for Demidov, compare that to playing with Dach and Laine, where not likely to get a defensive zone start, not likely to get a left side face-off, more likely than not to be deployed on the fly. It limits the different ways that Demidov could get on the ice. Whereas if you were to play with Kapanen and Newhook, there's all sorts of options. You could get a left side draw, you could get a right side draw, neutral zone draw, offensive zone draw, maybe even the odd defensive zone draw. There's a lot of different ways for him to get on the ice with that line as opposed to the line of Dach and Laine. So that's an interesting development because I have a feeling that even though I think Demidov's had a so-so training camp, has not looked especially explosive or dynamic or eye-catching, definitely not compared to the version we saw at rookie camp. I think we'll quickly see as the regular season gets going, he's going to have more and more of those moments that make you just kind of that make you stand up and take notice. And so the more they can get that onto the ice, I think the better off the Canadiens will be.
But you mentioned Dach and Laine, you're pairing them together. And it's funny because earlier in camp when Demidov was playing with them, my colleague at Radio-Canada, Martin Leclerc, had a great line. He said that line is not going to last any longer than a snowball in hell. Yeah. And he was right. It did not last. But do you have the feeling that by separating those three guys, even Laine and Dach, Marty is trying to find a way to get Dach ready for the season in his own right and creating some winning circumstances around him and a favorable environment so that come game one, Dach is as ready as he could be to assume the duties. And if they might put Laine back on his side again at some point, but for the time being, instead of trying to create a chemistry with Laine or carrying him or anything like that, just focus on making sure that you're ready for game one. By separating those three guys, he could do that with Dach. And it seems to have paid off because just like Kapanen, as camp went on, Dach got better and better.
Definitely did. And yes, I think the dynamic is similar with Dach and Demidov in the sense that Marty has to put both of them in positions to succeed, but you could also make the same argument for Laine. So it's a tricky spot. Everyone's going to look at, I think, a practice of it was Anderson, Evans, and Laine, and Veleno, Dach, and Gallagher. Interesting how quickly the lineup looks very different without Budzik, right off the bat. It really becomes a less formidable lineup. But yeah, I think putting Dach with high energy players who play fast and can go retrieve pucks, and I think Bolduc is that. Gallagher obviously is that. Veleno, after a slow start, I think started to show that, especially that game in Toronto, and he started to show that element, and I think that's the desire, is to have him with guys who can go retrieve pucks, who could be fast on the forecheck, aggressive on the forecheck, physical on the forecheck, and create offensive zone time so that Kirby Dach can operate, and Dach himself has been doing some of that and has looked faster and faster as camp has gone on. And I think everyone has a natural sort of defense mechanism with Kirby Dach where you watch him and then all the gifts start to show themselves slowly, and everything that anyone has ever seen in Kirby Dach starts to pop, and you're just like, oh yeah, that would be nice. Like this could be an impactful player. Oh, if he plays like this, he could do this, and this would change this, and this would lead to that, and this and that. And no one's willing to do that until he plays. I don't know at what point, but like 10, 15, 20, 25, who knows how many games, at which point you start to just accept the fact that this is what the guy is going to be. But he hasn't gotten there yet. I'm still waiting till the regular season starts and see what that looks like. And then I'll be waiting 5 games in, see what that looks like. And 10 games, like the burden of proof is high for Kirby Dach, and through no fault of his own. It's just that the reality is when you've got the same injury 2 years in a row, and you've shown a tendency to get injured rather severely year after year after year. You're gonna have to. There's a lot to prove, and so the one good thing I think in Doc's case is I don't think his head has ever been screwed on straighter than it is now. Seems very direct and determined. And I thought we talked in one of the previous episodes, about how he challenged that Maple Leafs defenseman, who kind of took a run at Demidov and tried to get into a fight. That was his first preseason game. I saw that as a good sign, as a guy who's engaged in the game and is behaving in a normal fashion or in a way that shows your commitment level to the competition on the ice. And the other night in Ottawa, or the other night in Quebec City, I should say, against Ottawa, um, he was all into that. He was all over that game, and in that sense, and afterwards was really annoyed at what Sabrango did. I think I asked him, "Did you say anything? Did you say anything to Sabrango?" He's like, "No, nothing. It was just a stupid play." And he just started. And to me, that's like, just him talking normally about hockey, about a game that he just played, has to be therapeutic for him. Like not be like, yes, I can play center. Yes, I want to play center. Yes, the knee feels fine. Yes, this, yes, that. He was just like talking about a hockey game that went off the rails and being upset and intense at it. And I think all that has value for him and is healthy for him to feel that way. And so I think the more times he's able to just be a normal hockey player and not have like the weight of the world on his shoulders and everyone wondering what's going to happen with you and all this, the better off he'll be. And that's only going to happen as he, to use the term of camp for the Canadians, as he stacks games on games on games. All that stuff will eventually get thrown by the wayside if he performs and shows what he can do. Because there's no doubt, there's never been a doubt in my mind, and I don't think in many people's minds, that Kirby Dach at his best, at his healthy best, is a player this team could very much use. Very
sure.
much.
Yeah.
And what we've seen so far is very encouraging, that the Canadians might get that version of him perhaps right off the bat. We'll see on Wednesday. But so far, so good. Looked very good. And it's a very encouraging sign. And it's got to feel good for him to be like, all the work I put in this summer is paying off now. And also a bit of regret, like, why didn't I put in a summer like this last summer? I probably should have.
So just to wrap up this Senators shenanigan portion and looking ahead to tomorrow, is there a balance there that could be struck by Martin St. Louis where he could have like close to an NHL lineup, making sure obviously that Suzuki's lines is playing, then a maximum of his guys are playing too, but at the same time using the fact that you've got certain guys that could use a last audition to rest some guys that you might want to protect. For example, a guy like Lane Hutson, who's clearly ready for the season. He doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think that he needs another preseason game.
He hasn't played. He hasn't played with Gouli very often.
No, but Gouli needs to play.
Yeah,
Dobson needs to play, right? So I'm thinking maybe that could be an opportunity there, and up front, I don't know,
but to play those two
but
together, you mean? To play Gouli with
who?
Dobson?
No, I would probably go Gouli Carrier for that one and try to keep Matheson and Dobson since they're destined to play together. But if they were to scratch, Hutson for that last preseason game, and up front, are you going to do you want to throw Demidov in there, or give one more game to Beck or to Jacky or
I
you
think that
know
fifth line of practice today should play. That Blais, Beck, Jacky line. I would play them. Choose which line you take out.
Yeah.
But I would play that line.
Okay.
And maybe, I mean,
that would probably be
I don't think Evans.
Kapanen. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't think Evans needs another preseason game. I mean, Anderson.
And they've played 2, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
They've played 2. Evans was very much involved in that game in Quebec City. I've never seen him angrier than he was in that game.
Yeah.
Didn't talk to us. Interestingly, we asked for him. Didn't talk. But anyhow, I think that's how angry he was. He was really angry. Have you ever seen Evans that angry? You ever seen Evans
smashing his stick like that? Yeah. That was That's not very characteristic of him.
No.
Josh Anderson was not angry. I mean, he walked in front of us. I said, "Oh, whole time hockey, huh?" He was so big grin on his face. It was like, some guys enjoy it more than others.
Maybe that line could sit, and that's a way to get Blais, Beck, and Jacky and get Veleno a rep with Dach and Gallagher. I don't know, but I would give those 3 guys a chance. It serves a double purpose, right? I mean, if the game goes off the rails, you have Jacky in the lineup. Blais can hold his own, but just from your pure hockey standpoint, give them one last chance to show you something.
Yeah.
And so I think that would make a whole lot of sense, and it wouldn't totally disrupt what's going on. You'd still have your top 2 lines minus Bodzik. I guess Laine would be nice to be there for power play stuff, whatever. But yeah, I don't know. It's I think that 5th line should get another shot because it's going to be a tight decision. It looks like Kapanen's in, but there's a 13th forward and possibly a 14th forward that they might want to keep. So I think there's a lot of decisions that need to be made.
Okay, in goal, Samuel Montembeault is going to play the whole game on Saturday night. And there's going to be, not that there's any controversy regarding who's going to be in nets in Montreal this year. Montembeault and Dobesh are going to stay, but on most likely on Sunday, there's going to be a bunch of guys put on waivers.
Yeah.
Kahkonen will be one of them.
One of Blais or Veleno might be one of them. Yeah. Yeah, possibly.
So, I would put my money on Blais personally.
Me too, but they're the 2 waiver eligibles who are on the bubble there, so yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kahkonen, I've been praising this signing, but I wonder if at this point in camp he could be of interest to other teams. That's
we've seen a couple of goalies. We've seen a couple of goalies move already, right? Connor Ingram went to Edmonton with a totally variable cap hit. I think Utah kept $800,000, if I'm not mistaken, to make it like a fully variable cap hit. Phoenix Copley gets claimed by the Lightning, where Vasilevsky's been sort of. So I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of this that all the teams do. Which teams need goalies? Which ones don't? When can we get them through? When can we not? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if he gets it through. I mean, we talked about it. The one-way nature of the deal. All that, everything in that deal was made to deter people from taking him on waivers, and now we've reached the point where, likely on Sunday, he's going to hit waivers. So what do you think are the chances that he gets claimed?
In my mind, they remain pretty low, but it's not. I see some teams that could be interested. Like Florida right now is over the cap, but they've got decisions to make regarding LTIR. And the fact is that after Bobrovsky, now his backup this year is Tarasov,
Right.
who's not exactly like a high-profile goalie, and they don't.
It's a Bill Zito reclamation project, right? He had him in Columbus, so they,
Yeah.
yeah,
So anyway, if there's any concern regarding Bobrovsky's workload, is Daniel Tarasov really the guy? I mean, Tarasov is pretty much has the same, almost the same cap hit as Kahkonen, but he can't. He's got a two-way contract. He could be sent down. They don't have. You have to look at teams that have either a shaky backup or don't have really a solid number 3 option. And I think that in that sense, the Panthers are probably a team that fit the bill. The Carolina Hurricanes have never been afraid to go with 3 goalies, if only because Frederik Andersen is often injured.
yes.
But right now, they've got Andersen, they got Kochetkov, and their third goalie is Caden Primo. So
Yeah, I don't think the one thing I think that needs to be kept in mind is that yes, Kakonen's a very good candidate to fill the role the Canadians have for him as a third goalie or as a veteran tandem goalie in the AHL. There's not many NHL goalies that he would be an upgrade over, right? I mean, you talk about Tarasov, or Tarasov, however it's pronounced, probably Tarasov, but anyhow, you know, is Kahkonen that much better of an option than him? Probably he's better, but how much better? Is he worth? Is he worth a waiver claim and putting him on your roster and taking that cap hit and all this stuff? Like I don't know. It's
a marginal improvement.
Kahkonen was in the AHL, largely in the AHL last year for a reason, right? Like and not only largely in the AHL, played for basically every AHL team imaginable last year. I think didn't he play for like 3 AHL teams last year? But I'm not sure about that actually, but I think he played for a lot. So while he's a very interesting, like NHL experienced depth goaltender, he did play for 3 AHL teams last year: Colorado, Manitoba, and Charlotte. He's not. The Canadians were smart to give him the contract that they did because it did increase the likelihood that he gets through waivers because he's not that great of a goalie.
No, he's a capable backup if their circumstances demand it.
He's an adequate backup.
Adequate.
He's an adequate backup. I wouldn't go so far as to call him capable. I mean, put up decent numbers in San Jose a couple of years ago.
You see, that's where the languages don't fit. Like capable is in French, capable is he can do it.
He's able to do it. Right.
That's it.
Adequate suggests more like he's like the bare minimum to do it.
Right. It's like mediocre. In French, médiocre is worse than mediocre in English.
Right. Yeah. So adequate is worse than capable. Capable gives the suggestion that he's not only able to do it, he's a competent backup goalie. You know, whereas adequate is like, well, if you need a backup goalie, he'll do kind of thing.
Okay. Well, then he's adequate. Okay. And then, maybe I don't know about Calgary. They've got behind Dustin Wolf, his backup is Prosvetov, who used to be with Arizona, then he left, and I don't know there. But do they want to invest money in where they're at as an organization? Remains to be seen. So I think that it's the likelihood, and it's also the fact that on that day, there are so many guys that are put on waivers, and it's, they're the last cuts. So it's the more attractive guys are on waivers on that at the end of the camp on that Sunday. Yeah. So maybe that, you flood the field with a bunch of guys, it's probably easier to get your guy through if that's what you're hoping for. So I like the chances of him remaining with the organization.
Yeah, so do I. I think the Panthers like the chances of Montembeault remaining with the organization too a few years ago. Things happen, you never know. It's possible. I'm not comparing Kahkonen to Montembeault. It's obviously a very different situation, but yeah, you never know. It's
Well,
uh,
I thought of Montembeault when the Lightning picked up Phoenix Copley, because there are some injury concerns regarding
it's a
Vasilevsky,
similar, yeah, it's a bit of a
So
similar
just
vibe
in
for
case,
sure.
for 10
Yeah,
days.
just yeah, that's it. He'll be right back on waivers in a week and a half. Yeah, that's
That's
it.
it.
You never know. And honestly, Copley's shown some good things
Yeah.
in his time in the NHL. It's not like he's not the best goalie, but there's reason to believe he could suddenly find something. But anyhow, it's in terms of Kokkonen, I think they should be able to get him down to Laval on Sunday. Um, Dobesh has looked good in camp.
Man,
Personally,
really good.
Jakub Dobesh, I like what I
Yeah.
see from him. And I
Yeah.
know that people have watched him in the games, and obviously he pitched a shutout the other night in Quebec City. Wasn't that challenged, but had to make some difficult saves. But even in practice, I feel he's looked really solid. This is
Yeah.
and I think it bears mentioning that there are people around the league who kind of look at Dobesh as having as high of a ceiling as Jacob Fowler. Like, it's not the pedigree and the competitiveness and the winning history of Jacob Fowler carries a lot, and he's done it on big stages, and there's a lot to like there, and this isn't a knock on Jacob Fowler. It's just that Dobesh's package, the size, the athleticism, the competitiveness, and his own personal drive, uh, I think is starting to get a lot more attention from some people, and I think he really has the potential to be something here. So good
Yeah.
camp so far. Let's see if it carries into the season. But based on what we saw last season for the vast majority of it, and so far in training camp, his NHL time has been pretty damn solid. And it's a young guy, and it's I think the Canadiens goaltending is in pretty good hands going into the year.
Okay, on a completely different note, you've got two guys who signed a new contract this week, and that could be of interest for the Montreal Canadiens. We're talking here about defensemen Luke Hughes and Jackson LaCombe. Luke Hughes in New Jersey signed an 8-year, actually a
A
7-year,
7 year.
$9 million a year contract, so $63 million total.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson LaCombe in Anaheim signed for 8 years at $9 million, so it's an even 1 year more.
Yeah.
Very, very different players, those two, but obviously both of them extremely valued by their respective organization. And it's interesting when you look at how tingy sometimes the Ducks can be in their contract negotiations. They didn't seem to
Sometimes.
have any problem giving all that money to Jackson
I
LaCombe after 2 years of solid hockey. He's a guy who's we often talk about the negative bias of playing on the West Coast, and you're not as
Yeah.
exposed to the. I think Jackson LaCombe is a prime candidate to explain why that is. But he's when I've seen him, he seems to be very much in control of the play when he's on the ice. Defensively and offensively, very very solid and complete defenseman, very good in transition. He looks, he's 6'2", but you would feel as though he's even bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
And he started to produce quite a bit of points. But anyway, those two guys, Luke Hughes and Jackson LaCombe, signing juicy contracts at $9 million a year. What do you think that means for Lane Hutson and the Montreal Canadiens?
I mean, the fact that they both signed at the same number, and it's not the same number because the extra year on Lacombe, that's a give to the Ducks, right? I mean, based on all the reporting that's been out there on Luke Hughes, is that Hughes, I think Pierre LeBrun mentioned that once the Hughes camp agreed to go to 7 years, the Devils agreed to go to 9 million. And so originally Luke Hughes was looking for a shorter term deal, still long term, but shorter than 7. He went up to 7. That's how he got to the 9 million number. Lacombe gives up an extra year of UFA at the same cap hit, which is a better deal for the Ducks in theory. Um, from January 1st onward, I just looked this up, but Jackson LaCombe was tied for 12th in NHL scoring among defensemen. He had 29 points in 46 games to finish the year, and it was a -1 on a pretty minus team. So like that, and played a ton of minutes. Like
Ton of minutes.
he was averaging 24 minutes a night from that point onward. So
Yeah.
put himself in um, some pretty elite company over that same time frame. Luke Hughes had 27 points in 40 games, 18th, tied for 17th in defenseman scoring. Dash 11 played 22 and a half minutes a night. Um, over that same span of time, Lane Hutson was fourth in defense scoring with 40 points in 45 games, a +7, and 23 minutes a night of ice time. So, regardless of what I just said, like the thing is that, rightly or wrongly, Luke Hughes is viewed as someone who does more than get points. Jackson LaCombe is viewed as someone who does more than gets points. Right now, Lane Hutson is viewed as a guy who gets points and doesn't do a whole lot else. And I don't think that's right, but that's something that he's going to have to shake through his play. And he did nothing last year, in my opinion, to suggest that should still be a label that sticks to him. But it is. So the reality to me, like when I saw the Hughes signing, my first reaction, and I wrote about this yesterday, but my first reaction was like, okay, he had to wait a week into camp before getting his contract. McTavish had to wait a week into camp before getting his contract. This might just be the new reality while everyone figures out new parameters of this new financial landscape. Maybe this is going to stretch out. And then boom, the next day, LaCombe signs a year early, or not a year early, but almost a year early, at that $9 million figure. And to me, my take on it now is that if the Canadians or the Hutson camp were talking about a number that was very far in either direction from that $9 million number, it's much, much harder to make that argument now than it was 3 days ago. Like it's hard for the Canadians to come in too far under 9 million. It's hard for Hutson to come in too far over 9 million. I feel like both camps here have been given two excellent sort of guideposts to be like, okay, like, could we do something like this? Something like this. And
but don't you think that the number of years is going to be for Hutson really a factor? Because, you mentioned how LaCombe, it's by giving an 8-year deal, he's able to get to $9 million. There seems to be a point in the trajectory of a player's career where adding a year makes him more expensive, and at some point adding a year enables you to get him at a bit more of an affordable rate. But right now the trend, that's because the cap is going up and there's so much money in the system, is to say, well, I would rather go for a shorter deal, and knowing that I'm going to get more money in my next deal. So if in the case of Lane Hutson, well, he could agree to stay like in that neighborhood of $9 million a year, but it might be on a shorter deal than that.
I
No?
don't, yeah, but maybe that's what he would want. And that's what both Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes did exactly that. They went on not short, they went on medium term kind of deals. And now they're both up for unrestricted free agency in the prime of their career, and they're both going to make a gob of money.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Lane Hutson's camp looks at that and says, "Yeah, that looks pretty attractive." But I don't think the Canadians are. I don't think that. I think that would be a non-starter for the Canadians. Like it's not. I don't see that midterm range happening here. I don't see them walking Lane Hutson to unrestricted free agency as fast as he can. It's like so. I think like Quinn Hughes is hitting free agency, if I'm not mistaken, at the earliest possible time, and I think Cale Makar is giving 1 year of UFA eligibility to the Avalanche, which is this coming year, or no, next year. Anyhow, I don't have
Next
it in
year,
front of me.
yeah.
Yeah, next year. So I think for the Canadians to entertain that $9 million range, it's going to have to be a very long-term deal. That would be my opinion. That would be my assumption, I should say. similar to what these two guys signed for, whether it's 7 or 8. I would think the Canadians would insist on 8. The one thing you got to remember is that Lane Hutson's played significantly fewer games than both these guys.
Yeah.
So and he can't sign an offer sheet next year. Um, and he's 2 years away from arbitration after this season. So there's a lot of those leverage points that Lane Hutson does not have, particularly the offer sheet one. But I think if both sides were reasonable, they could look at these two contracts and say, well, this provides a framework for us. Let's work in these parameters and let's figure something out based on what we just saw, because it's not outrageous to say that Lane Hutson should be paid similarly to the two guys who just signed. I mean, Luke Hughes is literally one of the best defenseman prospects in the league. He provides so much and looks like he's going to be a no questions asked number one defenseman for a long time. Jackson LaCombe, frankly, looks the same, and Lane Hutson looks the same, but because he's so unique and because he's so unprecedented, basically. I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around the fact, like, how do we commit to a guy that we've never seen succeed in the league before? Like, in terms of this player profile, we've never seen a guy like this be a number one defenseman or be on the level of a guy like Luke Hughes is projected to be, or a guy like Jackson LaCombe is projected to be. And so I think that's what makes this all tricky. Like it's on the one hand, there's the offensive production. On the other hand, there's everything else you expect a defenseman to do. And it's the everything else part that I think is the gray area when it comes to coming up with a number for Lane Hutson.
Since the beginning, since the whole thing started, I always thought that Lane had every advantage to wait it as long as possible instead of rushing to sign this summer. A lot of people were hoping that something would get done. I'm not surprised by the outcome of this situation, and that there's still a gap at this point, because from the Canadians' viewpoint, even though they could argue that there is uncertainty based on the frame of the player and his long-term outlook and long-term impact in the league. I think that the more games Lane is going to play, the more he's going to prove himself, and he's only going to get more expensive.
Probably.
And from that point of view, I think that the main things that he will want to showcase, even more than production, because I'm sure that the production will be there. I think that there are still some naysayers regarding his defense work, but if he can show that he can defend well with his stick and spend little time in his own end, I think that this is with more games, he's going to be able to show that that's who he can be. People will also realize that despite the fact that he's got a small frame, he doesn't get hit all that much.
Yeah.
And that should be noticeable when it comes to a player's assessment of his own.
And he wins puck
is
battles.
playing his own end. Yeah, that's it.
And he wins puck battles
with his stick.
Yeah.
And thirdly, if the Canadians are able to squeeze into the playoffs, what sort of impact could he have in the playoffs? I think that's, if he can be a factor in a playoff environment, that will erase any doubt, and that will just bring his dollar value even higher. So, but I like knowing how this guy, how intense he is at getting better, how obsessed he is. I like his chances of ticking all those boxes and eventually earning more than either LaCombe or Hughes.
Yeah. I always go back to what Jeff Gorton told us about going back in the room and this guy's making more than this guy, and does that make sense, and this and that. Like, I don't think anyone expects Lane Hutson to come in under Nick Suzuki. Those days are over. If the Canadians expect that, then this is not going to get done. But I think the Dobson number might be something, like it might be something where culturally they feel that making him the highest paid player on the team right out of entry level, when you could argue that, I wouldn't call it a haircut, but that Slav took a bit of a discount to get the term, that Caulfield took a bit of a discount to get the term, that I don't think Suzuki really took a discount considering how things
He set
were
the bar.
then. He set the bar, but at the time that seemed like a lot of money to give
Yeah.
Nick Suzuki, right? So, but I think in both Caulfield's case and Slavkovsky's case, and definitely in Gooley's case, who kind of made the trade-off of he took the shorter term, right? He took less AAV for a shorter term, but he took a pretty low AAV. Like that's going to be a very sweetheart contract if he stays healthy. Like that's going to be a slam dunk number one best most efficient contract on the team in my opinion. But um, I think that Dobson 9.5 number might cause the Canadians to be a little queasy, like not because they don't feel Lane Hutson should be the best player on the team, but just because of how that would shake out in the room. I don't know. I think it's.
You think? I mean, it's
I
they're
think
not
so.
at all in the same situation. The other one was on the eve of free agency, was
Well,
one
that's what
year
I'm talking
away. He
about.
had a
So when you're
lot more.
well,
Yeah,
so if you give a kid coming out of entry level more than that, when that's what you gave Dobson when he's a year away from UFA and he's arbitration eligible and he's has 300 games played in the league and has, it's this is how hockey people think. And we had Gorton say it on this very platform. He talked about this, like the room dynamics when a salary gets signed and whatever, like this is a real thing. These are competitive guys. And so I think that room's pretty well equipped to handle
hmm
whatever contract Hudson signs. And frankly, I don't think it would actually be a problem. I just wonder if in the negotiation process that the guys doing the negotiating worry that it might be a problem. Whereas if they actually did it and were to give Hudson, say 9.75 or whatever, if they had him go above Dobson, I don't think it would be an issue at all in the room. But I wonder if those guys might think that it would be, and that they use that as a cap. But now with the Hughes, the Luke Hughes and LaCombe contracts, I think the Canadians could justifiably go to Lane Hutson and be like, listen, you're not worth that much more than these guys.
yeah.
You're not worth incredibly more than these two defensemen who are excellent young defensemen um, in a very similar situation to you. Yes, you outscored them, but they do other things better than you do. Like you are in their category. And they both signed for 9 million. How can you ask for 10 or whatever? I don't know what he's asking for, but like whatever it is, it has to come back towards this number. And if the Canadians are undercutting that number, then they have to come up towards that number. It's just a natural magnetic effect when you have two, not similar stylistically, but similar situationally defensemen, similarly elite, young, promising defensemen that have bright futures ahead of them. When they each sign for $9 million a year, neither camp can come in at a number that's drastically different than that. So I think it should help the process in theory, in my opinion.
Yeah, but when I said that I thought that one more year of him proving doubters wrong, it could be one more. It could be another season where at the end of the year, he could. He won't. He wouldn't say it out loud, but his demeanor could be like, "Look, I might be in my second full season in the NHL, but I'm proving you that I'm already the number one defenseman on this team."
Mm-hmm.
Notwithstanding Noah Dobson being there at $9.5 million a year. If he
Yeah,
can prove that, I don't think that his teammates will have much of an issue that he's paid slightly more than Dobson.
I don't think they will either. I'm not talking about what the actual teammates think. I'm thinking about what the people do negotiating the contract think the teammates will think, if that makes sense. If they have a concern, which Jeff
Yeah.
really bluntly laid out in front of us when we spoke to him, if their concern is how is this going to play in the room, and they use that as some sort of mechanism to keep the number down, then that could be a factor, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I don't know
What?
that to be the case. I'm basing it on something that Jeff Gordon said, you know, 3 months ago. Like it's not, it might not even apply anymore. Like who knows? But I haven't talked to
But
Jeff Gordon about it recently. Is what I'm saying.
yeah. So, uh, your colleague at the Athletic, Pierre Lebrun, when he co-signed an article with you, mentioned cap culture or an idea of trying to maintain
Yeah.
some sort of an internal cap, which is an extremely difficult thing to do considering how the salary cap has exploded, how it's
Mm.
going to continue to rise, and you know, it, the money that's going to be available in 2 years seems to already be spent now. So there's a crazy inflation going on. And even though Nick Suzuki back in the day signed a contract that seemed quite high back then, it is already a discount. So it's not going to be really possible for the Canadians to keep Suzuki as the standard or as the measuring stick of all that. But what do you think are the ingredients that could make this possible to get at least close to the idea of an internal cap, such as the one that the Boston Bruins were able to maintain for so long, or the Tampa Bay Lightning were too, where you got success, guys inside the room say, you know what, we're let's make sure that we're all paid adequately, but let's make sure that A, we keep the band together, and B, that there's still money available to improve, to make this team even better. So it's going to be, it puts a burden of proof on this season for the Canadians to continue their rise and justify the fact that, hey, we got such a good thing going. Let's make sure that we protect it as a core.
I'm sure that's a big part of the Canadians' argument. I'm sure that's a big part of what they're selling, is that you want to be a part, and Lane Hutson has said it repeatedly. He loves what they're building there. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to win in Montreal. He loves it. And so now, does that mean he should take less money? Probably not. But the reality is that if you do want to win, there are certain teams who ask players to make certain sacrifices. Lightning's a great example. Like they will give you term for a lower AV so they can keep more guys together, right? And they've bridged guys before. I mean, I think the Sergachev model with what Tampa did with Sergachev and what Buffalo did with Dahlin is an interesting possibility here. Like neither of those guys were UFA coming out of those bridge deals, but they were close. And then Dahlin hit it really big with an $11 million a year contract, but Sergachev's came in relatively reasonable. Like I think it reflected his own value as a player. He's not really in the same, it's definitely not the same level as Rasmus Dahlin or even the guys that we're talking about now. But still, I think it was 8.6, if I'm not mistaken, that he took coming out of that bridge. And that a lot of that was part of that Tampa cap culture, that was a reflection of what other guys had done around him in order to build something sustainable where you can win. And so I think the Canadians are trying to do that here. I think, as mentioned, Caulfield bought into that, Slav bought into that, to a lesser extent, Gouli bought into that. And I think the Canadians would like, to some extent, not to the same extent, like not slide in under Suzuki extent, but to some extent for Hutson to buy into that and be like, listen, I could probably at some point get the contract I'm looking for. But I want to be a part of this and I want this settled and I want to show my commitment to the group. And so I'm willing to take this to do that. And because the reality is, like, this can all go sour, right? And, we saw it with Subban and the Canadians. I mentioned that as sort of a worst case example where a relationship between a player and team just goes completely south, and it starts with arbitration and haggling over contracts every single time they come up. But if it comes down to it, like, the Canadians could, just continue the QO route with Hutson and just punt it down the road, get him to arbitration, and he can make an arbitration case. They could go to battle in arbitration. They could this could be a very contentious thing where no one comes out the winner. Or it could be something where they put this to bed, put it behind them, officialize Lane Hutson's role on the core of the team. Hutson himself officializes it by saying, okay, I could have got this. I took this. I'm good with it. I'm happy I'm here. Let's get to work. But I think, frankly, probably both sides are going to need to give a little bit to get to that point. But yeah, that's the best case.
And it's also him. He could make that decision, but he needs to relay it to the people working on his side too.
Sure.
But
according to him, he stayed pretty. He stayed out of it.
Yeah,
that's his official stance.
But I think that you don't necessarily need to take less money. You just don't want to look like the greedy guy among your peers, because that's.
I mean, look what that did to Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner's status in Toronto changed when he went for every last dollar. He went for the most efficient way to get as much money in as short a period of time as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the way people viewed him in his hometown of Toronto, I think changed because of that. And so I think that's an extreme example. But yeah, that's an extreme example. You don't want to go quite that far, but yeah, I think every player should get paid fairly. You should get paid based on your status in the league. That I truly believe. You should never go below that. But do you need to absolutely maximize every last penny out of every contract negotiation that you take part in? Probably not if you want to win. I don't know how many people, I think no player would look at Kirill Kaprizov and be like, man, you just did the wrong thing. No one would say that. But I'm going to be very, very curious to see how Minnesota builds around him now. Because the common conception in hockey circles is, well, this isn't basketball. We have to build a team. You need, 12 forwards and 6 defense. And it's not like, you need a lot of players, which is true, of course. But just because it's not basketball doesn't mean the best shouldn't get paid accordingly. And Minnesota has all sorts of efficient contracts on their books. That Matt Boldy contract's aging marvelously, and Eriksson X contract is very efficient. They have efficiency on their books, whereas for the longest time they were very inefficient salary cap wise because they had these massive buyouts on their books. But so there are ways to work around it is my point, and that where Kaprizov's contract doesn't become some sort of anchor for Minnesota, but that's what you want to avoid as a player. You don't want to feel like your contract's preventing your team from winning.
Yeah.
That's not a good feeling. Even if you're very happy with how much money you get every month, it's not a good feeling to know that your contracts become a very big problem for your team. I imagine Carey Price thought this way after he obviously got injured and he just saw all the hoops that the Canadiens had to jump through to work around his contract. He didn't feel so bad that he decided to retire. He was going to get paid his contract because he was due to him, and I don't blame him for it. But it couldn't have felt good.
No.
I'm sure.
Or even worse, Roberto Luongo. My contract sucks.
My contract sucks. Yeah, that's it. I mean, he wanted to trade and he didn't get it. He knew why. So.
Okay, and I'll segue with this. Speaking of players who have good contracts.
Yes.
Or whose contracts age well, such as Boldy, in Minnesota. But during his tenure in Montreal, Max Pacioretty had one juicy contract for the Canadiens, one of the best deals. I mean, Marc Bergevin, in his early tenure, had a really good momentum of signing guys to very, very good and team friendly deals.
Yeah, Gallagher.
Brendan Gallagher could say a thing or two about that.
Yeah.
But in August of 2012, Bergevin signed Max Pacioretty to a 6-year contract worth $4.5 million, and year after year, Max was in the list of the best contracts, the most team friendly contracts in the NHL.
Yeah,
he fired his agent not long after, by the way.
He did.
And how he retired. So I think I think it's a good time to reflect a little bit on a guy who, man, he survived some gruesome injuries early on in his career and later. I mean, 2 Achilles. It's tough to come back from 2 Achilles.
Yeah.
So your thoughts on Max and a great career. He didn't reach 1,000 games, but man, he was such a productive player and an underrated player too, if such a thing is possible in the market of Montreal.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was the captain of the Canadians, and that's you rarely you're rarely underrated when that happens. But he was one of the more effective 5-on-5 scorers in the NHL for a period of 4 years. He
Yeah,
had a 4-year span, I mean, even 5-year span, I would suggest, um, where he was one of the most efficient 5-on-5, not only scorers, but he became one of the more efficient 5-on-5 players in the league. So that was something that he wore as a badge of honor. He did that largely with David Desharnais as centerman. He didn't really play with a top flight centerman throughout his time in Montreal, um, and grew into becoming one of the better all around wingers in the league. His defensive metrics or acumen was really strong, um, and just was a guy who was just almost to a fault a straight shooter, right? I mean, it's just like the guy who just told you everything that was on his mind and in his heart, and was always honest about it. And I will still maintain that the way he left Montreal was very unfortunate for a guy who loved it here as much as he did, and he loved the team as much as he did. For it to end the way it did was was really too bad. And frankly, I think the number one factor in the way that it ended was this notion of being on this team friendly deal for years and years, and wanting payback for it, wanting to be made whole, I guess, after all those years of providing service that was so above and beyond what he was paid. His hope that he would get it back on the back end, um, was not shared by Canadians management. And so the same guy who signed him to that contract didn't feel he was owed anything. So for Dan, the way it did was unfortunate. I'm happy he's staying in hockey. He's really close with Michigan head coach Brandon Naurato. They've had a long-standing relationship. Max wasn't at Michigan for very long, but I think it's a special place to him. He's obviously now going to work with Michael Hage pretty closely for at least a year. Um, but congratulations on retirement. Hell of a career. I'm gonna lay out the numbers and then I'll hand it off. 939 regular season games, 335 goals, 346 assists, 681 points, 89 playoff games, and this is where it gets a little tricky. 28 goals, 30 assists, 58 points. Um, Never found a way to kind of elevate in the playoffs. Although his first year with Vegas, he had some pretty good playoffs with Vegas, but in Montreal that kind of came to define him. Unfortunately, that the playoff performance didn't measure up.
so the 4 year span that you're referring to, 2013-14 to 2016-17,
Yeah.
during that time, there were only three guys in the league who scored more goals than him: Alex
Hmm.
Ovechkin, Joe Pavelski, and Sidney Crosby.
Yes.
And when it comes to even strength goals, one guy, Vladimir Tarasenko, at 103, and Max Pacioretty, and Alex Ovechkin both had 102.
Hmm.
So he scored a ton of goals during that time at a
Yes.
bargain ticket. So yeah,
And a
no
bargain
wonder
ticket
that
with
when it
with a so-so centerman. With all due respect to David Desharnais, he was not a number one center.
no, for sure. And it's funny because I chatted with Brendan Gallagher about that yesterday because I wanted to have his take on Max retiring. And
Hmm.
well, first Brendan said, I hope there's a day where he gets recognized for everything that he did for the team and the organization. He was a good teammate, a good player, did a lot for the community, and he enjoyed being a Montreal Canadiens. He should really be proud of the career that he had. And
Hmm.
regarding the center ice position, I said, it's when you think back in the day, there was they were thinner in the center position that they are now, and the in most years, offense was driven by two wingers, Pacioretty and Gallagher.
And Gallagher, yeah.
Yeah. So he said, well, there's a
The
reason why
Cannons.
everybody talks about the center ice position. It's tough to create without that. But he said him and Davey had a lot of chemistry together. They worked well together. And Patch would be the first to give Davey a lot of credit as well. So It's true that it's funny when you have that sort of relationship where that chemistry worked at such a level that we saw the best of Pacioretty, and he played with better centermen after that. But I think that his biggest impact was during those 4 years.
Mhm.
And Desharnais, away from Pacioretty, was not the same player either. So
No.
it was really the definition of a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, and they came up together. They played in Hamilton together. I mean, it's a very unique relationship where you clearly had like a borderline elite scoring winger. Well, not borderline. He was for that time period an elite scoring winger and a highly talented, gifted, smart centerman who was undersized and had his limitations, right? And so, but they worked together really well. I know I've told this story on the podcast, but I feel it's appropriate since we're talking about Max Pacioretty. I want to tell the story of when Max came to our charity street hockey game. I've told the
Oh
story,
yeah, you did.
but it's worthwhile because you know he didn't have to do that. And also, actually, there's two things that Max Pacioretty did. Well, there's probably more, but there's two things that stand out to me that he did that he didn't have to do. They did anyway. One was he gave us the first exclusive we had at the Athletic when we launched was Max Pacioretty one-on-one met me at a coffee shop downtown. I told him I'm starting this new thing. If you could please just give me an interview, it would be great to be able to launch with this. And he was like, sure. And on his own time, prior to training camp, met with me at a coffee shop downtown. It was on Demidov. Right, we were sitting right at the window of the sidewalk. And as we're talking, all these people would like kind of stop on the sidewalk and like do a double
Hey,
take and like, yeah, hey, that's Max Pacioretty. But no one came in and bothered us. We sat for like 30 minutes talking. So that's one thing he did they didn't have to do, and that I will always be grateful for. The second thing he didn't have to do that I'll always be grateful for is I asked him to come as a special guest to this charity street hockey tournament I took part in every year. Lars Eller was another one who did that. But Max's reaction to seeing it's very community, right? It's like in a parking lot behind a high school. The funds raised sent kids to summer camp, underprivileged kids to summer camp, and it was kind of tied to the summer camp that I went to when I was a kid and that my kids went to later. Very community event. And he came, he did the opening face off, he signed all sorts of autographs, he took all sorts of and stayed much, much longer than he said he would. He stayed for about an hour. He said he could come for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I was like, that'd be great. He stayed much longer. And then when I walked him back to his car, he was just like, man, that was awesome. Like I never had stuff like that as a kid. Like that must be great growing up in a culture where you can have things like that. And he was so his eyes had been opened somewhat, and he really appreciated seeing that, which is just a street hockey tournament. It's nothing fancy. It's just a bunch of hacks hacking away at balls and like not really doing very well. But I really that stuck with me. Like his reaction to it was how much he would have loved to have stuff like that as a kid. And he really loved the game and he loved Montreal. And again, it's an unfortunate blemish that his time in Montreal ended the way it did.
yeah.
I always have a lot of time for Max Pacioretty. I really do.
And a side note is when we talk about the alumni and the Montreal Canadiens alumni, there used to be a time where they were very, very visible. And I realize now, as a grown adult, that when I was a kid or a teenager and they would spend the summer playing softball games, there were a ton of Quebec players being part of this alumni.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this group.
It's like
Whereas now,
this caravan.
exactly. Whereas
Yes.
now you look at the alumni of the last 15, 20 years, the big names, whether it's Price, Pacioretty, Markov, who's going to be honored in early December, Tomasz Plekanec, it's hard to have them back in Montreal and have them involved. And you wish they were close, and you wish that they would, because
Hmm.
I'm sure that each of them, they truly identify as Montreal Canadiens, and they've been impactful and important for this organization. But it's just unfortunate that you won't have a ton of events where you can bring those guys from wherever they are, spread it around the planet. So yeah, it's just a bit unfortunate because
Well,
you look at the different. Yeah,
that's a trend. Think of
it is true.
the last star. It doesn't even have to be a superstar. The last star Canadians player who left the organization on good terms. I guess Shea Weber and Carey Price would qualify, but they got hurt. Like
Yeah,
they had career-ending injuries. But in terms of like Larry Robinson left on not great terms. Don't have to mention Patrick Roy. That's obvious. Guy Carbonneau left on not great terms. Like I mean, even not even like just it's just a steady line of people who left the team on not great terms.
yeah.
And
More recently, PK and Pacioretty for sure.
well, Pacioretty was one of the worst. PK kind of came out of nowhere, but Pacioretty was this summer-long drama. It was ridiculous. Like it was Burge and Jeff Molson showing up at Patch's golf tournament, making a whole show of it, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's insincere handshakes, and like it was just bad. So I would think that one priority for the current regime would be that they need to stop this string of the Canadians' most important players leaving the organization on bad terms. It's
Yeah.
been a long time going back. Like Guy Lafleur left the team on bad terms. I mean, like it's the greatest of the great. Like kind of in terms of this franchise, didn't leave the team on good terms and went and finished his career elsewhere. And so it's been a long time since I can't even think of a guy.
Well, it's
Would Yvon Cournoyer be the last guy who left the team on like solid terms and like on
well, he
his
didn't
own
go
terms?
anywhere. He just retired.
When's the last time that happened for like their really significant play? Gainey, I guess.
Yeah.
Gainey just retired, so Gainey I think would be the most recent. But yeah,
Well, depends on the caliber of players. You're talking about guys who had
no,
their number retired, right?
I'm
It's not.
talking about guys. Well, no, I'm talking about guys that are in the Hall of Fame, let's say, which is a
Mhm.
lower bar than guys who had their number retired.
Yeah, even Markov.
Yeah,
That's another
even
one.
Markov. It's a
Yeah.
long list. It's been a long time since a significant Canadians player left the team on good terms. And Pacioretty, unfortunately, it it impacts his. It shouldn't, but it does. It's part of his story in Montreal. And aside from that incident and that period, his story in Montreal was largely positive. But the playoff the playoff disappointments were also a big part of that story that were negative, but he did a lot of good things for this organization. He really cared. He cared a great deal about this organization and this city, and he loved it here. He loved living here. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'll finish on this because regarding Canadians figures and alumni, he's not retired yet, but Brendan Gallagher is one guy who's he's not from Quebec, but he understands the reality of the Montreal Canadiens as well as anybody, the impact, the importance of the team on the community. He understands every bit of it. And he's a guy also that, after his career will be able to come back to Montreal and he's going to be properly recognized. And we were in Quebec City this week and they love him in Quebec City for some,
Right. Yeah.
there's they love Cole Caulfield and Lane Hutson, and there's a buzz around Demidov, rightfully so. But there's something about the recognition of what Brendan Gallagher has meant throughout his career, and after the Nordiques' departure, and some fans in Quebec City starting to pay some interest in the Canadians just to peek, say, okay, well, let's see what this is about in Montreal. After the dust had settled, I guess that's when Gallagher showed up, and
Yeah.
he played, and he had a style of play that really fit with what the Nordiques fans liked, like the
Yes.
hardworking, heart and soul type of guy.
He's an underdog.
And yeah,
He's an
absolutely.
underdog. And Quebec City is kind of an underdog town. When could they have a little brother syndrome with Montreal for sure. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. I think Gallagher personifies that pretty well.
So they welcomed him warmly and open arms, and the fact that he got the first star the other night and the crazy ovation,
Mhm.
that was a thing of beauty. So yeah, I thought it was a cool moment.
Gallagher will probably be the next, really the first in a long time guy, significant Canadians player to leave the organization on good terms. He's in pole position to be that guy.
Yeah.
At some point.
Let's hope that it remains that way.
Yeah, that's it. Let's see.
All right. Well, we're done here. So thank you everybody for watching or listening to the Basu and Godin Notebook. If you are not a paid subscriber, we have also our Monday episodes that you can access once you become a paid subscriber. You can go to BasuandGodin.com to do so. You can subscribe monthly or annually. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate us 5 stars and maybe drop a little comment. Always appreciated. And we're going to be back. So on Monday, the last cuts will have been done by then. And can't wait for the season to get underway.
Yes.
It's
very excited. Yeah. And just one note quickly. So thank you to everyone who responded to our survey regarding the live event. We are working on coming up with a date and a venue. Enough of you responded to justify doing that work, but if you haven't responded, look through your email, see if, search Basu Godin survey, whatever. But, if you could respond, if you're interested in coming to sort of a live watch party and podcast recording at some point during the season, please let us know. It'll help us plan the event. It'll help us find the venue, find an appropriate venue for the number of people who might come. So thank you to everyone who has responded, even the ones who said no. That's very helpful. But if you do want to respond, the survey is still open. Please let us know. But we've already started working on dates and locations to bring that to you. So further details to come.
It's going to happen this year.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Sure. It's going to happen this season for sure.
Yeah. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.